to another class of taxonomy. Today we are going to go to lesson 2. Remember in lesson 1 we had talked about using the 5 kingdom system, where organisms are based in 5 kingdoms, that is kingdom Animalia, kingdom Plantae, kingdom Fungi, kingdom Protoctista, also called Protista, and kingdom Monera, which comprises of bacteria. So for today's lesson we shall be looking at kingdom Animalia. This kingdom comprises of animals. The characteristics of the animals, you have got 1, they are multicellular, meaning they are made up of many cells. 2, they are eukaryotic, meaning they have got a cell that has got a distinct nucleus covered by a nuclear membrane and distinct organelles. And then you find this cell doesn't have a cell wall and doesn't have plastids. 3, they have heterotrophic nutrition, meaning they obtain food material from other organisms. They don't synthesize their food material. And as they obtain organic food material from other organisms, they do so by taking it in so to speak. So therefore you say they have heterotrophic nutrition, and their nutrition is mainly by ingestion. Ingestion meaning to take in. For the animals, you find that they have specialized tissues, organs, and organ system. In these many cells that they have, we find a group of similar cells will come together and they're specially developed to form a specific task, giving us the tissue. And then the organs is basically a structure made up of different types of tissue that now carries out a specific function that is more specialized than the tissue. And then when we find a network of organs working together to perform a certain task, that gives us what we call the organ systems. So animals have got specialized tissues, organs, and organ systems. And the last characteristic we shall talk about is that the reproduction in animals is mainly sexual, meaning they reproduce by means of gametes, male and female gametes. For the kingdom Animalia, it has got a number of phyla. The kingdom is divided into a number of phyla. The number of phyla we find in this kingdom tends to vary from one author to another. For us, we shall consider 13 phyla in kingdom Animalia. The 13 phyla, from the simplest to the complex one, we have Porifera, we have Coelenterata, also referred to as Cnidaria, we have Platyhelminthes, we have Nematoda, we have Nematinia, we have Rotifera, we have Annelida, we have Mollusca, the Onychophora, Arthropoda, Echinodermata, Hemicodata, and Chordata. So out of these phyla, we shall look at some of them. We shall select some that we shall look at and consider further. So I start off with Phylum Porifera. Porifera is a phylum comprising of sponges. Sponges are characterized by having a body wall that has got many pores or holes in it. So Porifera actually means pore bearer. So for the Porifera, which comprises of the sponges, it is a phylum of simple organisms, simple animals. So for the characteristics of the Porifera, we find the Porifera, they do not have tissues and organs. Number 2, they have a skeleton that is made up of spicules or horny fibers. The spicules can either be made up of calcium carbonate or be made up of silica. If they are made up of calcium carbonate, we say they are calcareous spicules. If they are made up of silica, then we say they are silica or siliceous spicules. For the case of the Porifera, third characteristic, they are sessile, meaning they do not move. They tend to attach themselves on a substratum and do not move. Number 4, the body has 2 layers of cells in its early developmental stages. The 2 layers of cells, you have the ectoderm, the outer layer, and the endoderm, the inner layer. Now, because it has got 2 layers of cells, we say they are diploblastic. Di meaning 2. The body basically consists of a single cavity or a system of cavities, and then they communicate to the exterior via pores that are found in the body wall. These many pores in the body wall connecting the cavity that makes up the body and the exterior are what give the porifera their name, which means pore bearer. For the porifera, they are mostly marine, meaning they are found in salty water. And then we have a few, mostly salty water, but a few can be found in fresh water. In terms of reproduction, the porifera can have either sexual reproduction or asexual reproduction. Asexual is where they reproduce without making gametes. Their asexual reproduction, they do it by budding. Sexual reproduction is where they reproduce by forming gametes. Now, for those that have sexual reproduction, you'll find an individual sponge has got both male and female reproductive structures within itself. So therefore, they are hermaphrodites, where hermaphrodite means an organism with both male and female reproductive structures. For the porifera, the different animals are normally related to one another. So you find some similar characteristics they have that can help us to know which group of organisms is related to the other. Now, for the porifera, the organisms in this kingdom don't have characteristics really that they share with the other kingdoms of animals that we know. So because of that, we cannot say these simple organisms in porifera could have given rise to other higher animals that we know. And because they are thought not to have given rise to any other phylum of higher organisms, porifera therefore are referred to as a dead-end phylum. For this phylum, there are three classes. The three classes that we have in the phylum Porifera is basically based on the nature of the skeleton. So I've got three classes. Number one, class Calcarea. This comprises of sponges that have a skeleton made of calcium carbonate. These ones have got a calcareous, they have got calcareous spicules in them. And because the skeleton has spicules made of calcium carbonate, the same calcium carbonate found in the bones, you'll find them also therefore being referred to as the bony sponges. The spicules have got 3 or 4 rays in them. Then we have class Hexactinellida. Hexactinellida now comprises of sponges with a skeleton made up of silica. It comprises of the silica spicules in it. Now, silica is normally a component in the making of glass. For that reason, therefore, you'll find class Hexactinellida also being referred to as the glass sponges. For them, the spicules basically are made up of 6 rays and they are intertwined with one another. For that reason, they have got a very strong skeleton. And then you have the class Demospongi. Demospongi now comprises of the sponges that have a skeleton made up of the spongin fibers. Some of them are marine, some of them are freshwater. This phylum is made up of simple organisms, but they do have some economic importance. We say some of them are used as beauty artifacts. Demospongi you'll find being used for bathing, and so on. And then you have the second phylum we shall look at. Phylum Coelenterata, or also referred to as Cnidaria. Characteristics of organisms in this phylum. 1, they have got a sac-like body cavity, which also acts as the gut or digestive system. For them, they also have a body that has got 2 layers of cells. So they also are diploblastic, with the 2 layers comprising of an ectoderm and an endoderm. For them, they have radial symmetry, meaning cut any of them through the diameter, you are likely to get 2 parts that are equal, so you'll get 2 equal halves. They tend to exist in 2 forms. And because they exist in two forms, we say they are dimorphic. Di meaning two, morph meaning form. And the two forms that they have, we have got the polyp form and the medusa form. The polyp form is cylindrical and it is sessile, it does not move. Any movements it may have is basically by somersaulting. The medusa form is umbrella shaped and it is free swimming. It moves about by floating. The two forms, the polyp and medusa forms, tend to alternate with one another in the life cycle of the coelenterate. The other characteristic is that they have tentacles that have explosive cells. So whether it is the polyp form or medusa form, they have got tentacles. The tentacles in the polyp form are found on the upper end. On the medusa form, in the umbrella shape, they are found on the lower end. And the explosive cells that they tend to have, they assist in the capturing of prey, and these cells are referred to as nematoblasts. Phylum Coelenterata has three classes. So this basically is telling us about, this is the polyp form, which is basically cylindrical, and the medusa form, which is described as being umbrella shaped. The phylum has got three classes. So I've got one, class Hydrozoa, two, class Cyphozoa, and three, class Anthozoa. To differentiate the three classes, Hydrozoa are hydra-like. In them, we may have the polyp and medusa forms present, and one form may be reduced. In the class Cyphozoa, they are characterized by having a complex medusa form with a gastrovascular system. Gastro meaning a digestive and circulatory system that are intertwined. And this gastrovascular system comprises of basically water-filled canals. For them, the polyp form is reduced. And then you have the Anthozoa. For Anthozoa, these are coelentrates where the medusa stage is completely lost in the life cycle. So they don't have the medusa form in their life cycle. Then we have the Phylum Platyhelminthes. Platy means flat, helminth means worm. So this is a phylum comprising of flatworms. Characteristics of the flatworms: one, the body is flat. Two, they are triploblastic, tri meaning three, and this is to tell us that their body has got three layers of cells: the ectoderm, which is the outer one, the mesoderm, the middle layer, and the endoderm, which is the innermost layer. For them, they have a mouth, but they do not have an anus. The gut or digestive system comprises of blind-ended branches. They do have flame cells for purposes of excretion and osmoregulation. They tend to be hermaphroditic, meaning every flatworm you come across has got both male and female reproductive structures, so it can reproduce on its own. However, they have mechanisms to minimize self-fertilization from taking place. Most organisms in this particular phylum tend to be parasites. For Phylum Platyhelminthes, it has got three classes. So you have got the class Tubellaria, the class Trematoda, and the class Cystoda. Now, for class Tubellaria, these are flatworms that produce some poisonous mucus. They tend to have cilia on the lower side of the body, and they are not parasitic. So we come across a flatworm that produces mucus that they use to catch prey, poisonous mucus. They have cilia on the lower part of the body. They are not parasitic. Then that one belongs to class Tubellaria. And then you have the class Trematoda. Trematoda are flatworms that are leaf-like in shape, and they tend to have suckers at the ends. An example of a Trematoda, we have the liver fluke. Then you have class Cystoda, comprising of flatworms that have a body that is ribbon-shaped. This ribbon-shaped body is made up of segments, similar segments that we call proglottids. They don't have a distinct head, but they have got a head-like structure that is called a scolex. So if you come across a flatworm with a ribbon-shaped body that is spiral and made up of several segments that are similar to one another and a head-like structure, then that gives us a platyhelminth in the class Cystoda. For the Cystoda, the head may either have spines or hooks, or it may not have them. If it has got spines and hooks, then we say the scolex is armed. If it doesn't have any spines or hooks, then we say the scolex is unarmed. So to illustrate examples of worms in the three classes, we have the planaria here. Basically, planaria is in the class Tubellaria, the flatworms with cilia and produce mucus. We have the liver fluke that is in the class Tubellaria. And then we have the tapeworm that is in the class Cystoda. Then we have the phylum Nematoda. Nematoda comprises of roundworms that do not have any segments. Now, for the characteristics of the nematoda, we have number one, the body is rounded or is cylindrical. Number two, it is unsegmented. So normally say they have a cylindrical, non-segmented body. They are triploblastic. The body is narrow and pointed at both ends. And depending on the structure of the body, it is quite easy to distinguish the male from the female. Female tends to be larger in size. Male is smaller in size, and the posterior pointed end is curved and has projections. For them, the reproduction is sexual and the sexes are separate. We have got male and we have got female, which, as I said before, can be easily distinguished by the size and the nature of the posterior end. Larger in size, posterior end is not curved, that is a female. Smaller in size, posterior end is curved and has projections, then that is a male. The phylum also contains a number of parasites in it. For this particular phylum, we have got two main classes based on the presence or absence of a phasmid sensory organ. So the two classes we have in Phylum Nematoda are class Adenophoria and class Sesanitia. So Adenophoria are basically nematodes that do not have a phasmid sensory organ. They tend to be non-parasitic. The class Sesanitia, for them, they are nematodes with the phasmid sensory organ present. For them, they tend to be parasitic in nature. So this is an illustration of the roundworm with an illustration showing the two sexes. As I said, the female tends to be larger in size and the posterior end is not curved. The male is smaller in size, the posterior end is curved, and it has got these projections here that we refer to as spicules. Then you have Phylum Annelida. Annelida comprises of worms that are round and are segmented. So we say it is a phylum of segmented worms. For the characteristics of the Annelida, say for them, they have a cylindrical body. The body has metameric segmentation, meaning it is made up of segments that are comprising of similar units. And then the body segments have got bristle-like structures called chetae. Bristle-like structure, these are basically structures that are made up of hair that is tough in nature. And the chetae have got a purpose that they serve. The worms use them to grip onto a soil surface or any other surface that they are attaching to, and also they increase surface area. The worms may have or may not have parapodia. Parapodia are muscular appendages. Wherever parapodia are present, they tend to be the ones that attach to the segment of the worm, and then the chaetae attach on the parapodia. Where we have chaetae without parapodia, then the chaetae will directly attach onto the body segments of the worm. For them, they have a reproductive structure called a clitellum. The clitellum is basically an enlarged segment within the worm that is quite distinguishable. Usually it contains the reproductive structures in it. They have nephridia for excretion and osmoregulation. For them, they have a larva that has got cilia and moves around by swimming. This larva that is ciliated and is free swimming, we call it a trochophore larva. So for them, we say they have a trochophore larva, and trochophore is general, meaning any free swimming ciliated larva. So you may find other animals also having the same. They have bilateral symmetry, and they are triploblastic, meaning they have got 3 layers of cells in the early developmental stages. For the Annelida, there are 3 classes in this particular phylum: class Polychaeta, class Oligochaeta, and class Hirudinea. This is based on the presence or absence or number of chaetae that are there. Class Polychaeta comprises of annelids that have got many chaetae present, and also parapodia are present. Because they have got many chaetae present, that is why they are referred to as Polychaeta, poly meaning many. For the Oligochaeta, the annelids in this particular class have got few chaetae and they do not have parapodia. So the few chaetae are directly connected to the body segments of the worm. For class Hirudinea, they do not have parapodia or chaeta present, but they are segmented worms. For an illustration of an annelid, we have the earthworm, an example of an annelid. The earthworm is in class Oligochaetae, meaning they have got few chaetae and parapodia are not present. When you go to Phylum Mollusca, mollusca comprises of organisms we call the mollusks. Now with the mollusks, the characteristics that they have a soft muscular foot that is normally found on the belly side, also called the ventral side. They have a visceral hump on the back side or dorsal side, and the visceral hump contains digestive organs. Visceral hump simply means an internal mass of substances within the organism. And then they also have a shell that tends to cover the visceral hump. They have a tongue-like radula that they use for purposes of feeding. They have gills called the tenidia that they use for respiration, but the gills can also be used for filter feeding. They have a trochophore larva. Just like we said in the case of the annelids, trochophore larva is when we have a ciliated free-swimming larva. They have simple eye spots that can distinguish light and dark, so they can tell night and day. They tend to have 2 or 4 sensory tentacles. For them, they reproduce by laying eggs. This phylum has got 5 common classes based on the structure of the shell and basically also the tentacles that they have. So I've got class Monoplacophora, also referred to as univalvia, class Polyplacophora, also referred to as Amphineura, class Gastropoda, class Lamellibranchiata, also called bivalvia, and the class Cephalopoda. To differentiate the classes, we have Monoplacophora is when we have a mollusk with a single conical shell. Conical meaning the shell is cone-shaped. So you get across a mollusk with a single conical shell, then that is in class Monoplacophora. Polyplacophora comprises of mollusks with a shell, a conical shell that is divided into many units. So a mollusk with a conical shell with many units, then that falls into class Polyplacophora, where poly means many. Gastropoda comprises of mollusks that have a large muscular foot, and for them they tend to have a spiral shell. So large muscular foot, that is why they are referred to as gastropoda, and a spiral shell. The shell is spiral because during its formation the visceral hump rotates, causing the shell that covers it to become spiral in nature. And then you have the class Lamellibranchiata or bivalvia. Mollusks in class bivalvia, they have a shell that is divided into two equal halves. Reason why we also refer to it as bivalvia. For them, the foot is greatly reduced. For class Cephalopoda, for them, either they don't have a shell or the shell is internal and greatly reduced. So shell is either absent or internal and greatly reduced. In addition, we have the foot is incorporated into the head, and then it is modified into tentacles that have suckers. So it will be modified to give rise to between 8 to 10 tentacles. So for them, because the foot fuses with the head to give tentacles, they are now referred to as cephalopoda, where cepha means head, poda means foot. So cephalopoda means a fusion of the head and the foot. Illustration of mollusks that we have the common snail. This is in class Gastropoda. Here we have the octopus. Octopus is in class Cephalopoda because we have the foot fused with the head to give rise to tentacles. Then we have Phylum Echinodermata. These organisms in this phylum are characterized by having spines in their skin. So the skin is rough because of the presence of spines. Now, because the skin has got spines, Echinodermata has a meaning. Echinodermata actually means spiny skin. For the characteristics of organisms in Echinodermata, we have the skin has got calcareous spines and ossicles. Calcareous simply means they have got spines and ossicles that consist of calcium carbonate. For them, they are basically found in the marine. The adult is pentaradiate, but the larva has bilateral symmetry. For them, we find, for most organisms, the mouth tends to be on the upper side and the anus is on the lower side. But for the Echinodermata, we find the anus is on the upper side while the mouth is on the lower side. Reason why some people may call them the upside down animals. So the side where the mouth is the oral side. The side where the anus is, and therefore you don't have a mouth present, is the aboral side. So that gives them the characteristic of the mouth or oral side is on the lower side, while the aboral or anal side is on the upper side. The other characteristic is that they tend to have tube feet, also referred to as suctorial feet, that they use for movement. They are called suctorial because they are tubes. So when they attach onto a surface, they exert some suction pressure. For them, they don't have a proper circulatory system. For this particular phylum, we have got 5 classes. The class Asterias, also called Celaroidea. We have the class Echinus, also referred to as Echinodea. We have the class Ophiothrix, and we have got the class Cucumaria. Now, basically, it should have 4 classes, not 5. Now, difference between the classes that we have. If we come across an echinoderm where the body is star-shaped with 5 short arms, and then it is flat, and the tube feet are on the lower side, then that is in class asterias, characterized by a star-shaped body with 5 short arms. Tube feet are on the lower side, and the body tends to be flat. Class Echinodermata or Echinas. For organisms in this particular class, the body is spherical or globular. There are no arms. They have got 5 rows of tube feet that are found on the sides of the body of the organism. And for them, basically, we talk about this spherical body tends to be small in size. And then you have the class Ophiothrix. Ophiothrix is where they have a small body, is greatly reduced. The arms are slender and elongated, which enables them to crawl and swim very easily. And the tube feet are greatly reduced. And then lastly, I've got the class Cucumaria, where the body is elongated and they tend to be worm-like. Example of the organisms in the various classes, we have got the starfish, which is basically in the class Asterias. We have got the sea urchin, that is in the class Echinus. We have got the brittle star, that is in the class Ophiothrix. And we have the sea cucumber, that is in the class Cucumaria. Then you have the phylum Arthropoda, comprising of the animals referred to as arthropods. Arthropoda simply means segmented appendages. So these organisms are characterized by having segments. Characteristics of arthropods. 1, they have a chitinous cuticle that covers the body. The cuticle is tough and hard, and the hardness varies from one arthropod to the other. Number 2, the cuticle acts as an attachment for the muscles, and because it is on the outside, we say it is an exoskeleton. Thirdly, they undergo molting, meaning they shed off the cuticle from time to time. This is to allow for growth in size to take place. They have a hemocell. Hemocell means a blood-filled body cavity, because these organisms don't have blood vessels. So the blood flows freely in the body cavity. They have a nervous system that is found on the ventral side or belly side, and circulatory system is found on the dorsal side, which is opposite of what the higher animals have. They have metameric segmentation. In terms of vision, some groups have got compound eyes, some groups have got simple eyes, and the simple eyes of arthropods are called ocelli. They have a coelom, which is reduced. They are triploblastic. They have bilateral symmetry. Phylum Arthropoda has got 2 subphyla, basically depending on the mouthparts that they have. So I've got subphylum Mandibulata, comprising of arthropods, where the mouthparts consist or include the mandible. And then you have subphylum Chelicerata, where the mouthparts include the chelicera. Chelicera is a pincer-like appendage associated with the mouthparts. Now, to look at the 2 subphyla, each one has got a number of classes. The classes in subphyla Mandibulata, we have got the class Crustacea, comprising of the crustaceans. We have got the class Chilopoda, and we have the class Diplopoda, and also the class Insecta. Now, for the crustaceans, they tend to be marine. For them, the body has got 2 segments. They have a cephalothorax. Body comprises of the head fused with the thorax and the abdomen. For them, they tend to have compound eyes, and they are very distinct, and they are borne on stalks, and they tend to be marine in nature. Example of crustaceans, we have the crabs, the lobsters, and the crayfish. The Chilopoda. These ones consist of organisms that basically have got a flat body. The body comprises of many segments that are similar. They have got many pairs of legs, and we have got a pair of legs per body segment. and the legs tend to arise from the sides of the body segments. For the Coelenterata, they have got antennae, and they tend to be carnivorous in nature. An example of a Coelenterata is the centipede. Class Diplopoda. Again, for them, the body is cylindrical. They have many body segments that are similar. They have many pairs of legs, and we have got 2 pairs of legs per body segment. They have a pair of antennae, and they tend to be herbivorous in nature. Example of a diplopod is the millipede. For class Insecta, it comprises of insects. Insects are characterized by having a body that is divided into 3 distinct parts: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. They tend to have 3 pairs of legs that are found attached to the thorax. They may or may not have wings, but majority have wings. And for those that have wings, they may have 1 pair or 2 pairs of wings. For the insects, they tend to undergo, they basically do a lot of molting. And for them, because there are quite many, depending on the presence or absence of wings, the insects are divided into 2 basically subclasses. So you talk about the subclass Pterygota, comprising of insects with wings, and subclass Aterygota, comprising of insects without wings. Now, for the insects with wings, they're the ones that tend to undergo metamorphosis, and the metamorphosis can either be complete or incomplete. For the Aterygota, the insects without wings, for them, they do not undergo metamorphosis. Then we have the subphylum Chelicerata. It has got 4 classes. You have the class Pycnogonida, comprising of primitive marine chelicerans. We have the class Meristomata, again primitive chelicerans with a broad cephalothorax. We have the class Scorpionida, basically comprising of the scorpions. Scorpions are characterized by having a stinging tail, and they also tend to have simple eyes, and the body is flat. And then you have the class Arachnida, which are characterized by having simple eyes. They have they comprise of cephalothorax, and for them, the cephalothorax and abdomen are distinctly separated by a constriction. So you say they have a waist-like constriction in them. Example of organisms in class Arachnida: we have the spiders, we have the ticks, the mites, and so on. Then you have the Phylum Chordata, comprising of the complex organisms, simply referred to as chordates. Characteristics of chordata: we have the notochord present at some stage in their life cycle. They have a hollow dorsal nerve cord, the one that basically ends up forming the nervous system, central nervous system. They have pharyngeal clefts. These are basically spaces in the pharynx region that normally provide space for formation of other organs later. They have segmented body muscles. So you talk about myotomes. They have a post-anal tail. They have a circulatory system that basically flows forwards ventrally and backwards dorsally. They have got limbs that arise from more than 1 body segment. They have bilateral symmetry, and they are triploblastic. Phylum Chordata has 3 subphyla based on what happens with the notochord. So I've got subphylum Urochordata, subphylum Cephalochordata, and the subphylum Vertebrata or Craniata. Subphylum Urochordata, these are chordates that have a notochord in the larval stage only. In the adult, there is no notochord. It disappears along the stages of development. So for Urochordata, notochord in the larva only, and it is limited to the tail part only. Subphylum Cephalochordata. For the cephalochordates, the notochord is present and it persists throughout the life cycle of the organism, and it extends to the head. For subphylum Vertebrata or Craniata, the notochord is actually replaced by the vertebral column, or what we simply refer to as the backbone. The vertebral column can either be made up of bone or it can be made up of cartilage. And then for them, we also find the brain is enclosed in the cranial cavity. These are the bones that form the cranium. So because they have a vertebral column that replaces the notochord, and they also have a brain enclosed in a cranial cavity, that is why they are referred to either as vertebrata because of the vertebral column, or craniata because of the brain present in the cranial cavity. Now we shall look further at vertebrata. So for the subphylum Vertebrata, it basically has got 5 classes, so to speak. Now the 5 classes comprise of the class Species, that comprises of the fish, the class Amphibia, comprising of the amphibians, the class Reptilia, comprising of the reptiles, the class Aves, comprising of birds, and the class Mammalia, comprising of the mammals. Now, for the case of the class Species comprising of the fish, we have got further subclasses in here. So I've got a subclass Chondrichthyes, basically comprising of cartilaginous fish, and the subclass Osteichthyes comprising of the bony fish. Now we also do have another subclass comprising of the anathans, which are jawless fish. Now to look at the characteristics of the fish. Generally fish are found in water, so you say they are aquatic. Their body is covered by scales. They have got fins for locomotion. They do have, majority have got lateral lines for sensitivity. They breathe using gills. For them, they have a swim bladder. Some have got lungs for purposes of buoyancy. And they are poikilothermic, meaning they cannot regulate their body temperature internally. They regulate it, and it actually changes with environmental conditions. And then we have amphibians. For the characteristics of the amphibians, generally. For the amphibians, they are partly aquatic, partly terrestrial. For them, they have got a soft, moist skin that can act as an additional respiratory surface in addition to the lungs. They do not have scales. The skeleton is comprised of bones. They have 2 pairs of pentadactyl limbs, meaning 2 pairs of limbs that end up in 5 digits. So penta means 5, dactyl means digits. For them, they have got external fertilization, and they need water for reproduction. They have got visceral clefts in the larval stage only, where the larval stage for the amphibians is called the tadpole. The adults basically tend to be more terrestrial, and they use lungs for respiration. They undergo metamorphosis where they change form. The larva is very different from the adult. They don't have external ears, and they tend to be poikilotherms, just like the fish. For the case of the amphibians, we talk about 3 classes, rather 3 orders in this particular class. Yeah. So basically for the amphibians, we talk about 3 orders. We have got the order Apoda, amphibians without any legs. We have got the order Urodela, amphibians with basically a long elongated tail, and we've got the order Anura, comprising of amphibians without a tail at all. And then we have the next class of reptiles. Yeah. Now for the characteristics of reptiles. For reptiles, they are mainly terrestrial, but you'll find a number of them also you'll find them near a water body because of the fact that they cannot regulate the internal body temperature. Their skin tends to be covered with dry scales. They have a bony skeleton. They have 2 pairs of pentadactyl limbs. They tend to have internal fertilization. Then they lay the fertilized eggs. Some of them will take care of their young, some will not take care of the young. And the fertilized eggs tend to produce young ones that are similar to the adult. They are basically small forms of the adult. For them, they don't have an external ear, and they are also poikilothermic. One other characteristic of the reptiles, they tend to live for a long period of time, but they have got very slow rates of reproduction. Here you have the birds, characteristics of birds in class Aves. For the birds, the body is covered by feathers. The legs tend to be covered by scales, the lower part of the legs. They have got 2 pairs of pentadactyl limbs, and the 4 limbs are modified into wings for flight. The skeleton is light, made up of pneumatic bones. Pneumatic bones are bones that have got spaces in them that are filled with air. This is an adaptation to make the skeleton to be light in nature to make flight easy. They have a heart that has got 4 chambers in it, so you talk about a 4-chambered heart. They don't have teeth, but they have a honey beak. Fertilization is internal. The female lays the fertilized eggs, which hatch into young ones that are miniature forms of the adult. They have got a very well-developed egg that is covered by a protective shell that is made up of calcium carbonate. They don't have external ear, but unlike the other classes before, the birds can regulate the internal body temperature, so they are homeothermic. Then we have the mammals. Mammals are the category or class of highest animals that we have. The mammals, basically, they have the following characteristics. They have got hair on the skin, or at least a part of the body. They have a bony skeleton, 2 pairs of pentadactyl limbs. For them, they breathe or carry out gaseous exchange using lungs. This time, they have an external ear that is quite visible. The young ones are nourished by milk that is produced from the mammary glands. Now, for them, they can also regulate their body temperature. There are 3 subclasses of mammals. We have those mammals that produce milk from the mammary glands that they use to feed their young ones, but they lay eggs. They don't give birth. So those ones, we put them in the subclass Monotremata, meaning egg-laying mammals. They are referred to as the primitive mammals. And then you've got mammals that give birth to young ones that are not very mature, so they cannot survive well on their own. So these mammals have got a pouch called a marsupium, where the young ones complete development before now it can move out to live on its own. So for such mammals, we put them in the subclass Marsupialia, which refers to as pouched mammals, meaning they have got a marsupium. And then you have the other subclass of mammals. Mammals that give birth to fairly mature young ones that can exist quite well. So for those ones, they don't have a pouch. Those ones, we put them in the subclass Eutheria. So depending on what the mammal does, we have got 3 subclasses. Monotremata, egg-laying mammals, subclass Marsupialia, the pouched mammals, and subclass Eutheria, that is the mammals without a pouch and give birth to fairly mature young ones. And that brings us to the end of today's lesson. Thank you and stay safe.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.